Good morning, 5th grade. Today's lesson launches us into our final unit of the year in social studies. We're going to learn about the War of 1812. It's that last part of our dates chant that says, in 1812 versus England we fought to defend and expand the new land we just bought. But there's a whole lot more to the story than that. So today begins a 4-part series. It should take you through Thursday, in which you're going to learn a very fast-forwarded version of the War of 1812, since we are not in school together, and since the year is winding down quickly. I decided to stick with my Boston theme. Not going to go with the Boston accent, but each day maybe wear a different Boston shirt. Now remember, you have a document that you're supposed to be filling out as you listen to these lessons, and it looks like this. You should be able to fill out lots of sections of each page today, including the first 3 on the first page, the bottom part of the second page, a little bit of the third page, and all of the fourth page. Pay attention to which parts of the document you can fill out today. It doesn't necessarily go in order of the lesson, so keep your eyes on each page of the document as we go. Of course, that's why I'm recording a screencast in part, is that you can rewind and pause and stuff if you need to. Partly because these have been so well received, and also partly because I've downloaded a bunch of videos I haven't used yet. We're going to throw some TikTok videos in to all the lessons this week just to spice it up as we come down the stretch. As you're now well aware, Mr. Sweet is no stranger to TikTok. I mean, there's some of them that you just can't not laugh to. I mean, I dare you to try not laughing to this. See what I mean? Laughter's contagious. You just can't help it. Well, without further ado, let's get into the War of 1812. Roll it. Here's your first lesson. The War of 1812 was fought in 1812. If you're in my social studies class, you know I often like to go a half step backwards before moving forwards in our study of history, just to help make sure we're sure of how what we learned about has brought us up to where we are now. Let's do that right now. We learned that in 1789, the United States elected George Washington, who in 8 years became known as president for his neutrality. John Adams followed for 4 years, and he helped keep us out of war with France. And then Thomas Jefferson was famous president for buying the Louisiana Territory. Well, our 4th president becomes James Madison, and he's going to be known for what he does in the War of 1812. By 1812, the young United States already had a few enemies, one of which was Great Britain. After all, we had just fought them not that long ago in the Revolutionary War. But there was another people group who weren't that happy with the United States, and that would be the American Indians. I mean, after all, they had been here for hundreds, thousands of years, and we had come and taken over their land, first pushing them out of the New England area in King Philip's War, and then pushing them out of the Ohio Territory in the French and Indian War. And now we had just continued pushing them west and west with our purchase of the Louisiana Territory, etc. So they were not too happy with the United States. So by 1812, a lot of American Indians were ready to leave their peaceful ways and turned into a fighting force to be reckoned with.
Ray, what's your ninja disguise? Yeah,
Well, it's one thing to have enemies that don't like you, but why on earth would we go back to war after we just finished a long Revolutionary War? Well, the next section of this lesson is going to propose to you 4 reasons I think we went back to war with England in 1812. Now, you only need to write 3 down on your document, so pick the 3 maybe that you understand the best. Here we go. You may recall that one of the stipulations in the Treaty of Paris that ended the Revolution was that British soldiers were required to get out of North America altogether. They had to leave their forts, they had to go back to Europe. That was the deal. Well, we found that in 1812 and the years leading up to it, not all the soldiers were gone. Settlers moving west to territories like Ohio, Indiana, and the areas around the Great Lakes found that there were still some British forts out there, and there were still some British soldiers in those forts. They were violating the Treaty of Paris, and we caught them. They were busted. To make matters worse, some of those British soldiers that were still out west were teaming up with local Indians and attacking American settlers who were moving west. Now these are just American families with kids and grandparents, totally unfairly being attacked by a bigger, badder opponent.
A Wish Foundation, both teams have agreed to come together and have Tommy run the first play of the game. And he got the handoff, and there he goes. A little cutback move, and it looks like he's gonna go all the way. Look at him go. Wow. This is really one of those heartwarming moments in sports where you just... Oh! Oh my God! That is not good.
A third reason we went back to war was that we didn't have a strong navy, and the British took advantage of that. Their naval ships were often attacking American trading ships in the Atlantic Ocean and capturing our goods and occasionally taking our sailors too. I mean, can you imagine that? You're just cruising along on the water, doing just fine, and then boom! But maybe the worst part of this was that they were taking our sailors. There's a term for it called impressment, and sailors were being captured and impressed into service, basically enslaved to work for the British Navy. And in 3 years leading up to 1812, the British had captured and impressed almost 6,000 American sailors. Well, we were not okay with that. I mean, to us, this was an act of war. Can you imagine being an American sailor on a boat when all of a sudden you're just taken without your will and captured?
Be honest.
The fourth reason we went to war with England in 1812 might take a little bit more explaining, but it has to do with who the adult Americans were in 1812. By 1812, most of our founding fathers had passed away, and we had new leaders in government. Names like Andrew Jackson and Henry Clay were now running the show in the government, but it wasn't about who they were as much as it was when they were born. The average age of a person in government in 1812 was 42. If you do a little math and subtract 42 years from 1812, that gets you back to the year 1770. Well, what do we know about 1770? If you were born in 1770, that means you were born right into the era of the seeds of revolution. The Boston Massacre happened the year you were born. The Boston Tea Party happened when you were 3. The Revolution started when you were 5. And so you probably grew up watching your friends and your friends' dads and maybe your own brothers and dad go off to war and fight Britain. You grew up knowing that Britain was the bad guys.
Run.
Now you're an adult. You may be even in the government, but that feeling that the British are the enemy has never really left you. It's not going to take much for you to get fired up about kicking Britain's butt again, especially once you hear about all the things they've been doing, violating the Treaty of Paris, impressing our sailors and stealing our stuff, attacking settlers moving out west. These people became known as warhawks, that generation of Americans who had grown up during the Revolution, who are now in government. Although most Americans didn't want to go back to war, these warhawks really wanted it. Names like Henry Clay and John C. Calhoun, that scary-looking dude, were accused of wanting more war. Give me more.
Ice cream for her birthday party. Legally, let go. Let go.
Many of you know that Mr. Sweet likes to go visit historical places on vacation and often drags his family there. This is me last year at the grave of John C. Calhoun in Charleston, South Carolina. Remember that it's the power of the legislative branch to declare war, and there were a lot of warhawks in the House of Representatives. They had been watching closely these things that were happening with Britain. They were ready to kill themselves some more redcoats. One of the sections of the sheet you're filling out asks you to pay attention to two big oops moments during this war, one at the beginning and one at the end. Well, at the beginning of this war, there was certainly a big oops.
Just relax and fall, okay? 1, 2, 3. No, wait, no!
On June 18th, 1812, the United States declared war on Great Britain. But what we didn't realize was that 2 days earlier, Britain had met themselves and decided to stop picking on the United States. They didn't want a war. So they decided to stop attacking American settlers moving west. They decided to remove their soldiers from North America. They decided they would stop picking on American boats and impressing our sailors. But we didn't find all that out. See, in 1812, the rate of communication was extremely slow. Without modern technology like phones and email, they could not let us know in time that they were going to stop picking on us. So, in other words, with modern technology, the War of 1812 may have never happened. I can't even imagine the faces on the Americans when they realized that this war was a big mistake.
What is that?
Mama.
Is it good? Is it spicy?
Spicy.
In 1812, the United States flag looked like this. It had 15 stars and 15 stripes because we had 15 states at that point. Some may be disappointed in this, but we're not going to spend too much time on the beginning of this war. Most of the early battles took place out in the Great Lakes region, with boats from the Americans and the British Navy clashing at, quote, sea. Now, we attacked some British forts up there because our thought was that maybe we could claim Canada. But we lost our fort in Detroit. We engaged with them in a battle at what's now Toronto. And we won several surprising naval battles. And I say surprising because we had a teeny tiny navy and they still had a big giant one. One of the more famous wins was at Lake Erie. Led by an American commander named Oliver Hazard Perry, the Americans rallied to victory when it seemed they were surely going to lose. Surrounded by the enemy, and at a time where most may have surrendered, Perry famously quoted as saying, "Don't give up the ship," a rallying cry that eventually turned into a flag that you may recognize from our hallway this year. This victory turned Oliver Hazard Perry into a bit of a superhero. People believed he could defeat anything. If you've never seen one of the Great Lakes, they really look like an ocean. This is a picture I took from the top of my hotel in downtown Cleveland a number of years ago, looking right at Lake Erie. That's the lake where Oliver Hazard Perry had his famous victory. Another famous American win took place on Lake Champlain in 1814. That's a lake that separates New York from Vermont. And yeah, I took my family there too. So the first couple of years of this war, it was kind of a tie. We won some, they won some, but we're not really going to get into the battles too much. Sorry if that disappoints you. I know we were building up to the action of fighting, and there's nothing like building up to the climax and then being disappointed.
Ever come across a leaf and step on it, but no crunch? Disappointment. You ever check your phone after being away from it, but no notifications? Disappointment. You ever receive a letter, but it turns out to just be a bill? But it actually turns out to be a bunch of leaves your northern friend sent you for the crunch? But still no crunch. Disappointment!
Come back tomorrow for part 2 of our series on the War of 1812, where the action shifts to the Atlantic coast and the British target our capital, Washington, D.C.